Welcome to Arth Unearth. We are your hosts, Akash and Ruchir.
Arth Unearth is a fortnightly podcast where we deconstruct themes from movies and TV shows to discuss the economics, politics, and science behind it.
In this episode, we sit down with Israr Hasan to discuss the Netflix movie Extraction, which came out earlier this year. We deconstruct a variety of things, starting from Edward Said's conception of Orientalism, yellow filtering in Hollywood movies, and then moving on to discuss private mercenaries and the case for drug legalization. This is the first of the three parts of this episode. Here we primarily look at the movie Extraction from a sociological standpoint. We talk about Edward Said's conception of Orientalism and its criticism. We also talk about the concept of white messiah complex and the phenomena of yellow filtering in Hollywood. If you want to listen to us talk about private mercenaries, you could switch to the second part. And if you want to listen to more economics, maybe about drug legalization and alcohol prohibition, you could directly skip to the third part of this episode.
Welcome to Dhaka.
Welcome to the podcast. Today, our guest is Israr Hasan. Israr is a fourth year student in economics at the BRAC University in Dhaka. He's also a very good friend of mine and the Bangladesh regional coordinator for South Asia Students for Liberty. Israr is a regular columnist for the Daily Star, which is Bangladesh's most circulating English newspaper. Welcome to the podcast, Israr.
Thank you, Akash. I'm glad to be here.
So today we are discussing the movie Extraction, which just came out on Netflix 3 months back.
So yes, Extraction was released in late April this year, and it is a movie directed by Sam Hargrave in his first film as a director. He's a stuntman, and that shows in the movie very well. It's written by Joe Russo, one of the Russo brothers, best known for directing Captain America and Avengers. So the movie features the Thor Chris Hemsworth as Tyler Rake and Rudran Jaiswal as Ovi Majan, kid of Indian drug lord Ovi Majan Sr. played by Pankaj Tripathi. It also features Randeep Hooda in an important role as Saju Rao, a former para special forces operator and now one of Ovi's top henchmen. So let's talk about the first impressions for the movie. Israr.
Horrible. Badly made.
Why would you say that?
Because it reinforces pre 1971 type stereotypes on Bangladeshis of being very poor. I mean, it completely stereotypes an entire country, which has been existed for the last 50 years. So you completely strip them of their humanity and push them into this, into the slum and make a film about them. It doesn't work out for us.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said on what you just mentioned. And I think the first impression for me was because of my interest in those areas was how they hired a mercenary, black market mercenary for doing this operation, which leads me to the broader topic of private military contractors, because I have a very keen interest on that side.
Yeah, so apart from private mercenaries, the whole thing there, I think it's a setup because drugs are illegal, and since drugs are illegal, there's a cartel business involved. There's an illegal cartel violence involved as well, and that's what we see throughout the movie. So it's an undercurrent that runs through the movie, although it doesn't come at the foreground ever because they really don't delve into the detail of the drug trade. But I think that's something which did caught my eye during the whole movie. Another thing, just adding to what Israr said, basically is very true because Bangladesh is one of the countries which is developing at the highest growth rate, not just in Asia but across the world, and is known for its vibrant economy. But that part of Bangladesh never came. So Israr, basically, what do you feel is off with Bangladesh's portrayal in the movie? I mean, I understand that it doesn't depict the real Bangladesh as such, but what's so demeaning about it? What's so demeaning about the caricature?
Yeah. So all right. So a bit about it exactly was that So when this was announced back in 2016, 2017, that there would be a film starring Chris Hemsworth, then that, like, a lot of people, were excited about it because Bangladesh can actually count a handful of times it's ever been actually, mentioned in a film or like portrayed in a film, right? It's one of the world's smallest countries, a large population, but it's not. I think it gets off to the mud. So the working title was Dhaka, and people were very excited about it because they thought it was going to be based in Dhaka, and it was shot in Dhaka, but it was shot in Ahmedabad and Bangkok. So one of the reasons why people actually got really kind of upset was about it is because of the portrayal of Bengalis, Bangladesh, and Bengali culture itself. So, for example, what you actually show in the film is you basically focus it on slums of Dhaka. You're talking about cosmopolitan city, but you're basically showing only slums of Dhaka itself. Because when I was watching this, the Bangladeshi itself, like I know the fact, like Bangladeshi slums or Bangladeshi neighborhoods are not places where you have narcos type drug wars happening or shooting and killing and maybe that doesn't really happen, or that you have the local residential waters being used for hunting down of terrorists, or you have child soldiers, right? I do not know what the authors read about Bangladesh or the directors or whatever they did, because honestly this was a horrible portrayal. And it's funny because the film was based on a book where Russo, I think, is the author, Tudor, I forgot the name of the book. So it was based on mainly on Paraguay. From the Paraguay, they shifted from Latin America to Bangladesh. So they basically shifted from a mixed area of mixed people to a country which is mainly brown people, and they completely made us look like African child soldiers running up and down the hill and trying to kill people. I mean, like I think Bangladesh has fairly done it better in that regard, in terms of combating child labor, but they got it horribly wrong. And so one of the things, as I was saying, is the fact, like they completely set up Bangladesh into a box where like everything is, there's no law and order whatsoever. A tiny minority rules everything. I mean, sure, there are nuances in that, right? I mean, you don't really portray Bangladesh in that manner. So one of the funniest parts for me watching it and portray Bangladesh culture was the part where, like, I think Asif, the drug pin in the Bangladesh drug lord, he sees from his balcony, he sees people celebrating Poila Boishakh, or Bengali, yeah, the Bengali New Year, which is also celebrated by the Punjabis for Vaisakhi. But in Bangladesh, it's more festive. It really happens in daylight. So I mean, you're making it look like Chinese New Year. Chinese New Year really happens in the night, but the Bangladeshis were shocked about it. I mean, what are they seeing? This is not Bengali culture. This is not Bengali the culture which we see right now. Another interesting part is actually even when the film is actually being shown. One of the parts is that, like, every time they show the scenes regarding Tyler chasing, trying to rescue the kid, it's yellow. There's a lot of yellow filtering which takes place, which actually tries to like basically romanticize the idea of poverty. This is poverty porn issue we have, completely trying to showcase this is a desolate land
Okay,
which needs saving. I
Israel,
mean, that's
why
another
don't you
part.
explain what yellow filtering is? How do you
Okay,
know that
so
in a
yellow
movie there's
filter.
yellow filtering being
So
used?
one of the issues you can see yellow filtering is when you watch a film like any Hollywood films, you actually see when they show, like, let's say countries where, let's say, a white person goes to, like, which in many cases in the post 9/11 world, you actually see that there's a lot of yellow filtering. The screen turns yellow to show very desolate land. It needs of saving. It's like very exotic. It needs to. It's like completely out of law and order. No law and order. It's completely chaotic. That's what yellow filtering is. The yellow filtering has actually been more or less an important part of Hollywood's filmmaking, especially in the post 9/11 world. So as I was saying, the fact that Bangladesh being a country which is obviously when it comes to the media at large, its names have shifted from a bottomless basket called by Henry Kissinger to, let's say, a country known for mosquitoes and floods. And then in the post 9/11, it was known as the Taliban hotspot, like a country where the Taliban revolution take place. So right now, it's known as the world's emerging economy, but the films just keep on getting it wrong. The films, films keep on getting it wrong and to show Bangladesh is a country which needs saving. And it's another fun part is that the Sultana Kamal bridge they were talking about at the end of the film when he's rescuing it. They made it sound so easy that it's exactly nearby. It actually the bridge links Bangladesh and India very closely. And one of the common things you find is that, like, even within the film you see less Bangla dialogue happening.
Yeah.
except maybe that
So yeah,
the dialogue is actually shown.
it seems like Bangladesh is very much an extension of India rather than an independent country as such.
Yeah, and that really does piss people off because the shooting did not take place in Dhaka. The working title was not even Dhaka itself. So
Yes,
yeah, you
indeed.
show the
So
only
they've
part
shot,
where you hear is like
yeah, they've shot the movie in Ahmedabad, Mumbai, and Bangkok.
yeah. So the only part where they actually, the only part where you hear a bit of Bangla, let's say the hip hop music is when I think Tyler is driving with his friend in his car or something. I think that scene it was, and so even when they show the rickshaws and whatnot, there's a word for Allah Sharbat Shoktiman, Allah is all powerful. The spelling is completely wrong itself. I mean, the Bangla seems very forced. It's not. I mean, so if you're looking for, I get after Bengali portrayals. I mean, surely it would be better if you have had like Kota, actual Calcutta's accent at least because you get the accent right. But the accent seems so forced itself. It seems so forced, and like randomly getting kids from Dhaka, and saying like we want to hire you. It has the elements of like the gory elements of war, which you see in war films, right? I mean, child soldiers do exist, but I don't think Bengalis and Bangladesh can actually completely relate to child soldiers running up and down Dhaka city on the roads and killing people or whatnot. That really doesn't really work for me. So it's complete let down for me. And that's where a bit of Orientalism does come from to completely exoticize us as being the other, because the West hasn't really moved away from 50 years of its idea of seeing Bangladesh as a very poor country, poverty stricken. I mean, if you're going to be showcasing a country, sure, make a country. Showcase Dhaka as it is. Dhaka has as a hyper capitalist going middle class. It's malls, it's mosques, it's bars, it's clubs. Sure, if you also show its poverty, show it as well, but don't overly exaggerate it, saying that we're all violent and we all want to have there's a lot of violence and whatnot, and then there's Hindi music playing all of a sudden. I mean,
Yes.
it doesn't really work out for me.
Yes, I mean, for a change, this time I noticed that India has not been showcased in such a negative light as it generally is in Western movies. In fact, I remember in the movie they show the Indian drug lord to be in jail, and most of the whole house of Saju is a pretty good house, and in general India to be a more developed country. And I didn't actually realize this distinction until the later part of the movie where it got really unrealistic. So we have helicopters of private mercenary groups flying in the capital of Dhaka, and then we also have a Bangladeshi colonel, the colonel in the army, a very senior position, working basically as a henchman for the drug lord, and himself using a sniper rifle to take him out. And this, it was totally unrealistic. We also had one scene where the drug lord, or the drug lord Asif, I think, he he asks the colonel to just shut down the city and look for to launch an operation to hunt the mercenary, and they really shut down the capital city for that. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
that's
so
So,
unrealistic.
that's
so
very unrealistic.
Israr, I'm not sure, but I mean, because The Economist has also been, slammed for not getting Bangladesh right. But The Economist, in its review of the movie, says that extraction has irked some people in Bangladesh not only because of what it gets wrong, but because of what it gets right. And it says that the drug dealer ordering a colonel from an elite security force in Bangladesh to shut the city, which happens in the beginning of the movie, that is definitely, uh, over the top. That doesn't happen. But if an officer had demanded a cut of the drug dealer's takings and shot him for refusing it, though, that would not have been so far fetched. And I think that goes for the subcontinent in general as well, because you know uh, drug trafficking is real, and it's definitely a multi-million-dollar business, and there are unholy alliances with the establishment. I mean, we'll dive into it later in the later part of the episode today, but I think let's put it out there. There are some real concerns. It's just that the chain of command maybe is reverse.
Yeah, definitely. There are. I mean, so one of the things really people really couldn't really, especially in today's day and age, where there's a lot of lots of let's say awareness about intersectionality, about poverty, about white savior complex, Orientalism and whatnot. The fact that the other is not the other, and we live in possibly the most globalized world. So when you basically showcase this idea of the economy, shutting the down the streets of Dhaka. I mean, Dhaka is 30 to 40 million people for God's sake live here. I mean, you just cannot just one or two roads exactly.
Okay.
That's very unrealistic as well.
Okay, so basically, for our audience, to break this thing down, we are linking this particular instance of portraying Bangladesh, as a very poor, underdeveloped country. Part of it is true, but part of it is not so true. I mean, that's not the only side of Bangladesh. So we are linking it to a concept in sociology or a concept in anthropology, if I may say, that is called Orientalism. And Orientalism got popular. Orientalism was a word which was basically used by people from the European intellectual community themselves. They used to refer themselves as Orientalists, um, who basically studied the Orient, which is Asia, which is not just Asia, but also, Egypt, also the Arab world,
The
China,
colonized world.
India. Yes, yes. So, or the Occident versus Orient. But Edward Said, who was from Palestine, and he was one of the most well-known cultural critiques of the last century. He wrote a book in 1978, Orientalism, and he used it as a concept to describe the West's depiction and their portrayal of the East in a contemptuous manner through the years. And he goes back so many years, and then he basically his claim is more of specific to the portrayal of the Arab world, and the portrayal mostly by France, but also by other European powers. And that theory was later developed into much more. That theory was basically expanded into many cultural critiques by sociologists and anthropologists from the Eastern world. So, Israel, could you give us a sense of what Orientalism means? Like, give us the basics. Tell us.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So as we're saying, Akash, so Orientalism was formed by Edward Said back in 1970s, and mainly in the way that the Western world, imperial world, actually viewed us, the colonial subjects, as. So they basically saw us as very, very different, right? We needed saving. We're like savages. We were very different because of our skin, the way we looked, and more importantly, we were studied and exoticized. We were experimented upon. That's exactly what the film in many ways does exactly. It shows this white person coming who is by an Indian drug lord to come to Bangladesh, where Bangladesh is a completely different place from where he comes from, where people, where it's poor, it's slummy, it's a slum area, and then you have young kids actually running up and down, terrorists who shooting and killing people. It's a desolate land, completely needs saving. That's how the Orientalist complex works. Orientalism basically keeps on it makes stereotypes based on how and on otherization. It's how the Europeans still see us, right? For example, it's pretty obvious the fact that the brown and blacks of the colonized world are not exactly seen as equal footing. Our culture is still doubted upon. Yes, our every culture has its flaws. Our culture specifically is being targeted upon because of the fact that we were um, below them in the power struggle. So there's again the power struggle does come out. Orientalism itself is it's still a very fascinating concept because with with established Orientalism in university campuses and whatnot, there still seems to be a lot of Orientalism, for example, in the places of pop culture. And this is actually one good example about it.
Right. So apart from,
Yeah, exactly.
I'll like to bring another concept. Actually, there's another sociological concept. Basically, I think it goes back to this poem that Rudyard Kipling wrote in 1899 called "The White Man's Burden," and it has been associated with Africa, with South Asia, with the whole eastern part of the world, uh, and uh, and basically that's also what Edward Said some 100 years later talked about in Orientalism. So Orientalism, we have basically we have given you a whole a picture of Orientalism, and we have told about uh, why why this portrayal is not uh, trustworthy, or it's not very just to the people that it basically portrays. to the people that it seems to talk about.
Yeah, definitely. That's exactly what it does. It actually completely distorts the image of the other and actually completely overemphasizes on it.
Orientalism, I feel, as a theory, takes things too far. And basically, if we talk about, because I feel that Edward Said portrays everybody from the West who wrote about the East in a singular brush. And if we really go by that, then the problem is that basically people in this part of the world, people in India, people in Bangladesh, or even people in the Arab world, um, they didn't know all so much about their history after after 200 or 400 or even 800 years of basically decline. And what happened is that a lot of these European scholars played a very, very important role. They played a very important role in basically studying Arabic or studying Sanskrit, and then bringing back the manuscripts and analyzing it, and then giving us our due. And that's basically where I think Orientalism gets it wrong, because if we see anything about Indian history or anything about Indian archaeology today, I mean, I would say that modern Indian archaeology or modern Indian history owes a lot to people like Alexander Cunningham, people like James Prinsep, who basically were the people who were the pioneer of basically trying to figure out what went 2000 years back in modern in basically ancient India. And they were the ones who went out, excavated, and did all those things. So those important contributions cannot be reduced to uh, you know broad brushed as as an Orientalist portrayal. And that's where I think Edward Said gets it wrong. And there's also very, very interesting criticism by Ibn Warak, where he says that Said's theory is very seriously flawed, and he accuses him actually of willfully misinterpreting the work of many European scholars, and also misrepresenting the Western civilization as a whole. And he goes on to say that the Western civilization is very open, and it has been very receptive to foreign ideas, and I think that there is definitely an element of truth in it. What do you think, Isra?
Well, I mean, definitely, all ideologies need to be criticized and whatnot. I mean, what even one of thesis initially was that the exact crimes Edward Said accuses of the West of, the same way, the same crimes which the other empires, especially Indian, Arab, or African empires had in terms of slavery and whatnot. We didn't have that. But you see, initially, the problem with the West itself, the West completely changes the everything. For example, art to law to everything. And it completely encapsulated the way we saw things. Because the problem here with, I mean, the Edward Said's criticism might be mistaken in certain reasons. I do agree with even what he said. But for example, in the case of portrayals, and that is exactly where Edward Said is so good, because he's also a professor of literature as well, comparative literature as well. So one thing we get is the portrayal of the person who is very different, because the West was not exposed to different cultures until it came to the point of colonization. Whereas past India, the Islamic world, or even Africa, we were constantly exposed to different cultures. The West was not exposed to different culture intermingling the way we were. So I think that also comes to the fact that our portrayals are very like much more nuanced, where their portrayals of us is much more negative.
If you liked our conversation so far, you could listen to the second part of this conversation right above this episode in the podcast app that you're listening to. In the second part, we talk about the history of mercenaries for hire and if at all extraction's portrayal of private mercenaries is realistic.